Assuming I did that correctly, I think we'll have everyone who's helping lead this breakout group on clean energy and green jobs. And hopefully that is the group everyone planned to join. If you didn't, you can click that help button and someone will help move you to the breakout room you intended to join. I briefly am Meredith Connolly. I'm the Oregon Director of Climate Solutions, and I'll be helping facilitate this conversation this afternoon. And I'll let the rest of the folks introduce themselves, and everyone else, if you could introduce yourselves in the comments while we go through it, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I'm Chaz Jones, and I am ATNI's tribal liaison in their climate change program.
And I'm Jana Gagnon. I'm the Sustainability and Government Affairs Director for the Blue Lake Rancheria Tribal Government.
I'm Coral Avery. I got a bit of an introduction earlier, but again, I'm a part of the BIA Pathways program working with both ATNI and the Northwest Climate Adaptation Science Center.
Great, thank you for joining us. And you know, we do hope this will be a conversation. I see there's almost 70 participants, so we'll do my best to facilitate the conversation and make sure everyone can talk, but you can take yourself off mute and join. We have 3 main questions to tee things off. I also took notes. There were some very good questions. There we go, I advanced the slides. There were excellent questions in the chat. I wrote some of those down. And if after we get through introductions, I will ask if you have a question that you didn't get to put in the chat in the original panel, please drop it here and we'll do our best to work through it all and hope for a great conversation. So as those introductions are rolling in, and like I said, I have a kind of subset of questions that I'll turn to after we go through these, though these cover the waterfront in some ways on what we want to discuss. So maybe we start here, and Jana, I don't know if you have some initial thoughts, and then everyone else can share their perspectives on what are the primary needs that tribes have in addressing clean energy and green jobs.
Yeah, I think, well, I'll just say that what I wanted to add to my comments about tribes and equity in the green energy space is that, you know, we really need an institutionalized framework that that honors tribes for the entities that they are, which is sovereign nations within the greater United States, and develop sort of a subnational UN framework for tribes to be able to engage more productively with the federal government, and then, you know, by extension, maybe get over some of the historic and current barriers that they're having with that the states that they might have to deal with, and the other local governments that may be a part of their partnership portfolio, but also maybe creating some issues specifically in the clean energy and jobs transition. And so I think tribes need a plan and supports for the main topics that I talked about in the presentation. Capacity building within tribal governments to be able to really develop a concerted national strategy within each tribal nation for clean energy development and the jobs that result from all that's possible with that kind of a strategy. Everything from operations and maintenance roles to launching new businesses and new manufacturing enterprises, to making sure that the government itself and its utility or its facilities departments have enough capacity to basically, you know, run whatever energy strategy they decide upon. And I'll just add before I end my current comments is that, like, in our development of microgrids, we got a lot of things wrong at the beginning because it was our first time at it, and we didn't know really have a good understanding of the capacity needs. But essentially, if you're running your own electricity grid, you're running your own electricity grid, and you need the capacity in electrical engineering, IT, project management, and finance that is attendant with running that kind of a system. And the great news is that there is funding for that. There's funding sloshing about out there, and it seems like there's a deficit of funding, but there is funding, and it's easier to get, I think, with a somewhat developed strategy that is also nimble and allows for a little bit of luck. And of course, we define luck as where preparation meets opportunity. So a strategic plan that allows for kind of nimble reorganization of the priority list, like, there might all of a sudden be a great funding opportunity to replace your natural gas HVAC with electrified heat pumps, or implement residential solar in your housing authority. And we have to be nimble enough to be able to take advantage of those sorts of opportunities when they arise.
Thanks. I think I will stop sharing so we can see everyone, and open it up for others to also chime in on what are the primary needs your tribe has in addressing this issue. And if it gets messy with people just chiming in and going off mute, we could do the raise hand thing, but I think let's try the don't be shy approach first, and then try the other if it's complicated.
Hi, this is Greta. I have a question for Jana. Just kind of wondering, you have done some amazing stuff there, and wondering how you came together with other local partners. What was kind of the process for getting everybody on the same page to move forward in the direction that you all wanted to move forward in?
That's a really good question. There's a mix of approaches. So in many cases, I would encourage people not to be afraid to pick up the phone. About 15 years ago, we were trying to figure out how to do better emergency communications, both digital and analog communication strategies for emergencies to communicate with the incident response hierarchy. So I picked up the phone and I called the county manager of emergency services, and I mean, it was bumpy because they had never really worked with tribes in the region before. But we had some funding that we were able to deploy to improve equipment for them. They in turn helped us spec equipment that was compatible with their infrastructure, and it all worked out. But so sometimes you just pick up the phone if you have a good idea. The more long-term, I think, capacity building partnerships that I highly recommend are with local universities. And that includes four-year universities or community colleges. If you have, if you're lucky to have both, like we do here. Sometimes it's tribal universities, but we don't have tribal universities in our area. We do have a university that's really good about serving tribal members and creating tribal programs, and so we're fortunate. But we have gotten a lot of our capacity needs, including access to grant funding, research and development funding, pilot project funding, engineering services. We partner with undergraduate and graduate students on certain climate smart infrastructure feasibility studies. So classes will come out to the Blue Lake Rancheria and they'll look at, like, we wanted to know what to do with our waste oil from our kitchens. and they did a biodiesel manufacturing study, and it came back and it was so good that the tribe immediately implemented it. And today we use the waste oil from our kitchens to create biodiesel, which we use in some of our transit buses. The same was true with solar energy on the residential, commercial, and community scale. All of the solar energy work that we've done, including the microgrid solar array behind me, started off as a student-led project. And these they're not all tribal members, but they do include tribal members from all over the country and closer in the region that are pursuing education and careers. And it's great for them to be able to come to a tribal community to do this technical work and learn in an environment that may be really comfortable for them. And other partnerships, like our partnership with our utility, the regional investor-owned utility. Again, just don't hesitate to pick up the phone and just start it. I don't know that there's any process to it. It's just, we've found our best success when we've been open to partnering with people that maybe in some sectors we have a more bumpy relationship with, like the state and some of the gaming issues. Those are issues. But on the energy side and the climate side, we are in complete alignment, and we've been able to do really amazing things together in a very short amount of time.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Jana, hi, my name is Raymond Paddock. I'm the environmental coordinator with the Central Council of Tlingit and Haida in Juneau, Alaska. First off, I just want to applaud the efforts that you guys are doing on that side. It's really great to see the infrastructure being developed in that regards. I feel a little dirty asking this question, but what are the economic benefits that are going to be for that community, for that region? And the reason why I ask that is because, money is power in that sense. And sometimes in order to push our wants and our sovereignty, it takes the money and the economic aspect of that. So with that, do you guys have a foreseeable future of what the economic benefits will be for the area?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I didn't include that in my slides because we had 7 minutes, and that's a tough one to keep to. But the microgrids, these mini electrical grids, we've built a lot of solar, and we've paired that solar with battery storage, and we save about $200,000 a year on pure play electrical bills. Other economic, and I guess wider economic and grid benefits are that we are able to really even out the use of electricity. So you call it demand response, or you can call it load management, whatever you want to call it. But with the use of solar, batteries, and advanced building controls, we were able to peak shave, so we don't pay really high demand charges. We have a certain electric billing rate that penalizes us for using electricity at certain times. We can just shave off those times and use our own energy at those times, which saves an additional amount of money. We were able to hold up, as I mentioned in the one example that I gave, that in these regional power outages, which because of climate issues are becoming more frequent, more severe, more longer term, it takes an enormous economic toll on the region. We had 3 public safety power shutoffs. Again, they were necessary to prevent catastrophic wildfire, so it's really a trade-off there. But we had people who lost all the food in their freezers. We had grocery stores that lost all their inventory. Nobody has the right amount of backup power for a 10-day outage. And if they do, it's dirty. It's diesel generators that we don't want in our communities anyway. So economic benefits of having microgrids writ large, or grid segments that you can sort of plug in generation in a larger electrical loop, are just that. They improve continuity of operation in these increasingly volatile outage situations, and thereby keeping the economy up. And so
Right.
we calculate that benefit in the millions and the tens of millions and maybe hundreds of millions of dollars per event, depending on what's going on.
And then also possibly the capacity development of the local people in the area, creating jobs within the area, and keeping
Yeah.
that money within the area. So essentially localizing the economy. Right?
That's right. And I like to say, I don't have to worry about my shipments of sun arriving. I do have to worry about my shipments of diesel arriving. And I know that's a concern in Alaska, not only the pure play logistics of it, but the expense of it. It's similar in Northern California, without the permafrost melt and without the enormously cold temperatures. But so we save money on fuels, we save money across the board in ways that that we've talked about, but we have to start de-siloing the hazard mitigation, emergency preparedness and response, and infrastructure and climate budgets. And we have to start taking some of that disaster response money and building it in up front into infrastructures that will not only reduce greenhouse gases and the disasters themselves, but will make us more resilient to them. So that's one of the key takeaways that we've learned from this, is that it's an economic investment, but it's also an emergency preparedness investment. And it's worked really well to avoid a lot of the disruption that unfortunately a lot of other people are feeling right now.
Thank you.
Jana, there have been a few questions about microgrids before we pivot from that topic. I see you have your hand up too. Is that about the same topic before we switch, or do you want to be first we call on after we answer the rest of the microgrid question?
I can go after the questions. It ties in, but it's also given a different context.
Okay, well, we'll be right there. I think there were two questions I saw. I mean, Jan, I think someone did ask, can you give a basic overview of what a microgrid is? Someone else asked, why do you see it more beneficial to put microgrids in yourself instead of partnering with the local energy supplier to have them put in battery banks and diversify the energy? So those are two ends of the spectrum on microgrids, one high level and one low level. So I'll kick it back to you to answer some of those. And then we have been asked this a few times, how do you replicate this microgrid system to other communities?
Yeah, these are great questions. So Kendra, I really like your question. So why do we see it as more beneficial to put microgrids in sort of in our local area versus kind of partnering with a larger maybe footprint? And the answer to that is we're doing both, really. Because we are at the Blue Lake Rancheria tribe is really at the end of the line, and we had the partnerships built out, the engineering expertise, the research and development and deployment funding from the California Energy Commission's Research and Development Fund. It's called EPIC. The first microgrid project, and actually the second one, was partially funded by these types of funds to figure out the answer just to this question. Okay, so how do microgrids really work on the ground? Can we replicate them, or are they really kind of these custom systems no matter where they are? And then how do they perform both technically and economically, so that, again, we can sort of flesh out the answers to those questions. And I think that we're still working on it for sure, because in some situations, depending on the site, microgrids will make a lot of sense. And the microgrids could either be connected to the larger grid, or they could be a complete island in and of themselves. And we see tribes in Alaska maybe falling sometimes into the latter category, where they don't have access, or at least quality access, to a larger electrical grid. So they're interested in building that microgrid as an island. And because of projects like the ones we've proven up, we understand more about how that operates 24/7. What are the limitations and benefits of intermittent renewables? And by intermittent, I just, solar, wind, to some extent, geothermal is a little bit more baseload, but paired with battery storage, how much of each do we need? What, should we have more batteries and less generation, or more generation and less batteries? Those kinds of things. And what we saw in our region is that it does make sense for these really fully functional islandable microgrids where you can, and they're just mini electrical grids. When you turn on the lights, you're getting your electricity from somewhere. In our microgrids, we've just created wires that create a loop where we can separate off from the larger electrical grid, and we can create and use our own electricity on site. And in some cases that'll make sense for clustered campuses like the tribe has, that have critical infrastructure, and other campuses like this, like hospitals. You can think of hospitals and tribal clinics and tribal police stations and government offices. All of those things might be really well suited to have their own electricity generation, battery storage, and be able to just generate their own power. In other situations, and ideally, these microgrids are nested within a resilient segment. So we're seeing now segmentation of the grid like we've never seen before. Usually electricity in the past was generated by huge generation plants. You think of big coal plants or natural gas plants or nuclear plants, huge centralized plants, billions of dollars invested in these things. And they ship electricity out to everywhere. Now we're seeing the reverse of that small electricity generators like solar arrays, you can think of a solar array on your house, are generating what we call in a distributed way. So they're distributed out, they're spread out, and they're a bit smaller. They're a little bit more nimble in what they can do. And I think where the limits, or where the best sizing of those microgrid loops, whether it's for a region or for a specific campus, is going to depend on that site and what the characteristics are. But capacity comes in when we're talking about tribal communities doing this, because you do have to have the expertise to run your own electrical grid, 24/7 response, people that are trained to work on high voltage lines. It's all doable, and we've been doing it a long time, so there's lots of expertise out there. We just have to port it around a little bit and train some more people up to do it. I think that maybe answered both, I hope.
Yeah, thank you, Jana. Okay, Patu, I turn to you now to be able to answer your question.
So I guess I just really wanted to comment about like challenges perhaps, and and I'm from the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, but I live in occupied lands of the Duwamish, Muckleshoot, Tulalip, Suquamish, Snohomish. And, it's like, it is with a heavy heart that I don't live in my community. I think my 5-year plan included my hometown. That didn't quite work out, but at the same time, I'm always interested. I'm a tribal member. I want to see all of our nations thrive, and I do feel like microgrids is like a huge component to really having that resiliency. We all know like Hurricane Katrina, like example, you know, we've had several examples and hey, we know you have yourselves to rely on type situation. But I will say too, I think within like the social justice spaces, there's a lot of call to switch away from fossil fuels. And like in Cali, there wasn't fossil fuels as much and brownouts. So then you wonder what communities were impacted with that. But with that said, like I think in the context up here, we also know that the Columbia River is, you know, one of the most engineered rivers in the world. Those dams are antiquated. Shifting away from fossil fuels just puts more pressure on that river, and having those alternatives needs to really be a part of that conversation. And it would be nice if these efforts were restorative for the opportunities, as far as just the ways that our communities have paid the biggest price environmentally and socially for building the economy of the Pacific Northwest. And that does include occasionally selling power to California. And so it is really exciting to kind of hear these projects that have come full circle. I personally like the emergency management context. A lot of it is command and control type operations when things are happening, but I think it's also a good leadership development model. And I think another really big barrier is that a lot of our partners, I think it was Jana that made the really awesome point that federal partners, it would be great if they had people that really understood tribes as on both sides of the equation. And I just think there needs to be more intentionality to develop and actually truly support professionals and youth and elders and our peoples within this conversation. I think that the environmental sector really still has a lot of work to do about contending with its past around eugenics and really the lack of inclusion of BIPOC and people of color. And that's a huge barrier. And I work on, you know, to some degree with like community-based policy development and proposals around green jobs in the King County area. And I find that, you know, we're getting there. And I think that if we can kind of get behind these and really kind of bring our perspective in and not have like these kind of environmental policies just benefit upper middle class white, you know, demographics, that's a whole new conversation. And that's the one that needs to happen for us to really address climate resiliency and change too. And I really appreciate this conference. I think it's really helped to like point us in that direction. I'm really feeling that energy. And really grateful to, you know, really be a part of the conversation. So yeah, anti-racist work. I think it's something that needs to happen, especially if people want to work with tribes or do work with tribes. And that's coming as a tribal member, tribal professional, somebody that cares about this topic.
Thank you.
There's some good models for emerging now, specifically between states and tribes. I sit on a disadvantaged communities advisory group that it's a lot more actually I think influential than that term sounds. But in California, the California Energy Commission and the California Public Utilities Commission have been very collaborative in figuring out how to address those issues of equity and historic disadvantages and access issues, if we're talking about, you know, energy and water and clean transportation, et cetera. So I know we only have a few minutes left, and I'm wondering, Coral, if you have comments on kind of what we've talked about, or any of the, I mean, it could be related to microgrids, but it could also be related to equity, justice, and how you see career workforce development and green jobs being perceived in people of your generation. You know, not to make wide sweeping comments, but we're interested in that.
Yeah, thanks. I honestly, I'm getting a little bit lost. There's so many great questions that are in there. So we're just trying to take notes really quickly. But just with some initial thoughts, the technical pieces are really important, but I'm glad that the conversation has also come across some of those more social aspects. And as a younger person and new professional, recent graduate, although renewable energy isn't directly the area that I'm in right now, it's something that I've always been interested in and that has a lot of potential for job growth and growth within that industry. And it's definitely something that's going to become increasingly relevant and necessary in the future. And as you mentioned during the opening remarks, there's a lot of other areas that are going to have that are going to be positively influenced within job, like the work field. I'm not really sure what the term is there, but it's not just renewable energy. It's also about public safety. It's also about you know, regional planning and education and improving that training and capacity that you gave that great example of how it really boosted folks' resume and gave them opportunity in other fields of work in other areas as well, and especially in rural communities. Yeah, I personally, as a young person, see a bright future for renewable energy, and am excited to see where it goes, especially working with leadership in tribal country and other BIPOC communities too, because there's gonna, like, you have to navigate things very differently than in the more mainstream field of renewable energy. There's a lot of sensitivity towards, you know, cultural sites and kind of protocols that folks don't understand. So that tribal leadership is really important to make sure that we're not only creating these opportunities for our communities, but also not, you know, damaging any other areas and working with other groups. So that's what I wanted to share. And then we're kind of out of time, but I just wanted to invite any other Indigenous youth that are here to share any thoughts that they have about how youth are kind of leading in this area, or where you see a future in this field for yourself or our generation. Or if there aren't too many youth on this call, for other folks to share as well. But I see Paul Williams has a hand up.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to ask if there's anybody out there who has access to education materials for K-12 students in this field. The Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that there's a 51% increase in jobs in the solar installation area in the next 10 years. If you want equity, you got to have a job. That's what equity is. It's employment. And right now, the people who get jobs are those who get educated, and that's not always, you know, fairly distributed. So if you want to change things, you really have to start with education. I mean, one place to start is education and ensuring that tribal youth receive the education they deserve.
I agree, and I think it's good that we're getting a new education secretary that that's knowledgeable in those things. Tribes have developed a lot of models. The one that always springs to mind is the ANSEP model from tribes in Alaska that is specifically focused on STEAM education for a climate smart economy, and it really addresses all of those educational topics that tribal youth may, again, be suffering from generations of subpar access to. So we have that gap to get across, but I think it's a new day to be able to have these educational discussions and to build on the good programs that tribes have already created. There's a lot of climate programs and hands-on makerspace programs that are already developed that we need a lot more knowledge sharing of, so that we can wrap it up into programs that are hopefully supported by the federal government.
Thank you. And that was NSET?
ANSEP.
Oh.
I forget what the acronym, ANSEP.
Thank you.
And Paul, it's in the chat, but Bonneville Environmental Foundation has some school education programs that tie into clean energy as well. And we can put together some resources. I know we only have about a minute. Thank you for this wonderful conversation. If you have other resources you want to drop into the chat, please do. And we also I dropped in a resource list, but we'll be sharing all these materials at the end as well. So just want to thank Jana and Coral and everyone who has joined and shared their wisdom today so that we can all move forward toward more clean energy and resilience for tribes and communities across the country. Thank you.